Welcome back to Oliver Scholar's CEO Salon Series with your host, Dr. Danielle Moss Cox. On this episode, as we commemorate Women's History Month, we bring to you I Am My Sister's Keeper, uplifting girls and women of color, with special guests Rolanda Telford, Sidra Sebastian, Tolu Olupona, and Michelle Lemonnier. Let's talk.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be celebrating Women's History Month with you all. Get a cup of tea, get your popcorn. I think this is going to be an amazing conversation. As you know, I am the CEO of Oliver Scholars, a New York-based organization that works to expand educational opportunities for high-ability Black and Brown students in all 5 boroughs. So now that we got that out the way, let's dive into this conversation, which we've aptly titled, I Am My Sister's Keeper. When I was a middle school teacher back in the day in the Boogie Down Bronx, I started a girls club for my middle school students. And that was my kind of foray into understanding that girls, and particularly Black and Latina girls, need something different, need something more from youth workers and educators. So with that, I'm going to begin to introduce our panelists, and they'll tell you a little bit about themselves and the work they're doing on behalf of young women and girls of color. So first, I'd like to welcome Dr. Tolu Olupona. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why this issue is meaningful to you?
Hi, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. I'm Dr. Tolu Olupona. I'm the program director for the psychiatry residency program at Interfaith Medical Center in Brooklyn. That essentially I'm training a new generation of people who are becoming psychiatrists, and I'm responsible for their training. I'm also in private practice, and in my private practice, I treat a lot of women, a lot of Black women. My youngest patient is 16, and my oldest patient is 74. So definitely working with Black women and our issues is very important to me, and I really take pride in the opportunity to have many private conversations and contribute to helping to change their lives.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm delighted to welcome Sidra Sebastian, who is with Grantmakers for Girls of Color. Take it away.
Thank you for having me, Danielle, and hello to everybody who's tuning in. My name is Sidra Sebastian, and I'm the fund manager for the Black Girl Freedom Fund at Grantmakers for Girls of Color. And Grantmakers for Girls of Color is a national philanthropic intermediary that is focused on lifting, advocating for, supporting, and resourcing girls, femmes, and gender expansive youth of color.
Love it. And next, I'm delighted to introduce Rolanda Telford Hastick.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for everyone who's viewing today. My name is Rolanda Telford Hastick, and I am the board president for Black Women for Black Girls. Black Women for Black Girls is a given circle that's composed of Black women from the greater New York area that supports organizations and causes that seek to enhance the lives of Black girls throughout the 5 boroughs. I'm also a founding mother of a college access program here in Brooklyn called the YW Brooklyn Lead, which helps high school girls go to college and graduate with little to no debt. And I am also an Emmy Award-winning producer for Capturing, a documentary on voting that empowers Black and Brown girls. So I am one of many of the empowerment queens of New York City in the space of Black and Brown girls.
Love it. Yes, you are. And next, I'd like to introduce Michelle Lemonnier.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lemonnier. I'm the is there an echo here? Can you all hear me?
There's a little feedback.
Oh, okay. I hope that goes away. I'm not really sure what to do about that. But I am the co-executive director of Vibe Theater Experience. We are a Brooklyn-based performing arts organization that provides free theater, music, and multidisciplinary arts education academic, and wellness support services like therapy, youth leadership, and workforce development opportunities to Black girls, young women, and gender expansive youth of color ages 13 to 26 throughout New York City and, as of 2020, nationwide. Through our intensive programming, we engage, inspire, and empower our young people to write, publish, direct, and create performance art based on their lived experiences. I'm also a proud alum of the organization as well, and very happy to be here.
I love it. Thank you all so much for everything that you're doing for our communities. So first, right, we want to kind of like identify what the issues are and why young women and girls of color deserve our focused attention. From your perspective and vantage points, can you talk to me about what the issues are and why your efforts exist?
Yes, I can go. So I'm in the space of mental health, and already we have an epidemic with mental health issues in the country, as everybody knows. Depression, anxiety, substance abuse, all these issues are going up. But in particular, with the women that I see, we have to deal with a lot more issues than a lot of my other patients. I'm still talking about issues of racism, both at school, in the workplace, discrimination, both at school, in the workplace, with a lot of the women, even the young girls, young adults, issues of self-esteem, issues of various traumatic events that has happened to them that they're still processing, issues of economic issues that's affecting their ability to be gainfully employed or stay at school. So a lot of these social issues are issues that I have to address in addition to the other mental health issues that we treat, that I'm trained to treat. So yeah, those are the issues that I'm seeing with the girls and women I'm dealing with.
Does anybody else want to chime in? Go ahead, Rolanda.
Okay, so there's two things here, right? Because this is a keeping it real conversation. So one, we're Black women. One, we're Black, and two, we're women. And so we exist in both of those identities at all times, right? And in so many ways, Black women have a harder and worse experience than almost everyone else. We're overrepresented in minimum wage jobs. And when we do have decent jobs, we're often the only Black woman in the room and have greater variety of microaggressions than other women and other races and ethnicities everywhere. And then the caveat, we're always paid less than men and most other groups of women. But the story of the Black woman is one of resilience, right? And so that's why we're here today. The story of this Black woman.
I love that. Cedra or Michelle Ann?
Yeah, I would actually love to chime in on that. Uh, Girls, and particularly girls of color, live at the intersection of inequality. So we've addressed, we have racism, we have gender inequality, we have classism. And on top of that, Black girls also go through adultification and adultification bias, meaning that they are seen as more mature and older than what they are and as treated as adults. And we see this being replicated and seeing it being expressed in their education system, how they're 3 times more likely to be sent to a juvenile detention center more than their counterparts. So it's actually very urgent that we invest in them and that we focus on the things that they are going through and have a conversation with them. I think the urgency in what they go through and talking with them to see how we can better serve them is highly important. So that's what I wanted to chime in.
And I appreciate you naming investment, right? Because sometimes we can come from that idea of like who deserves money, who is in need, without actually listening to or speaking with girls and gender expansive youth of color. So what does that look like to continue to quote unquote solve problems that are not centering them because they're not listening to them, right? And even in spaces that may be creating opportunities to be in conversation with girls and gender expansive youth of color, they're not necessarily then doing what they tell you to do. And so I think that's an issue that we need to get over as adults, to make sure that we are sharing spaces with young people, that we don't pat them on the head and say, wow, you're so articulate, but that we actually do what they say, that we follow their lead, and that we invest in them in a range of different ways. And not only when we can identify a particular issue that they're dealing with, but that we're also investing in the amazing things that they are doing right now, whether it's their innovation, their artistic vision, their activism and leadership. There's so many ways that we can be supporting their health and safety and well-being that, yes, addresses issues, but also pours into them an investment that can really help them launch to do things right now and not just when they get older.
So, Cedra, you talked a little bit about investment. Why was Grantmakers for Girls of Color founded?
So Grantmakers for Girls of Color was founded about 6 years ago, but in April of 2020 was the first time that we actually began to release monies and do our own investment. And when G4GC began, we began in community with other folks in philanthropy who were thinking about how is it that they do better, right? How is it that they work alongside and behalf of Black girls, girls of color, Indigenous youth, and gender expansive youth? What did that look like in a space where oftentimes they're cut out of being at those tables and in those rooms? And so from the beginning, our work was leading with the guidance of being in community with young people. In April of 2020, what we were witnessing was that while for some people in this country who may have been having a racial awakening, what was missing from the conversation was a gendered lens. What was missing from the conversation was, where are our young people of color, specifically femme, girls, and gender identified youth, who need to not be looked over, right? Who are not going to get whatever trickle down program of investment that people were thinking were going to happen, and started our first initiative, Love is Healing, which was a rapid response to community needs that we were seeing in communities of color, specifically girls and gender expansive youth. And then later on in that year, we started the fund that I manage, the Black Girl Freedom Fund, which is focused specifically on resourcing Black girls, femmes, and gender expansive youth in the United States.
I love that. So as we kind of roll into the conversation around strategies, I would love to talk a little bit about mental health and mental wellness. I think that as a young woman, and even as a grown woman now, right, one of the things that I have struggled against in majority spaces is this notion of invisibility. I know that, on the one hand, Oliver is unlocking educational opportunities that our students wouldn't normally have access to, but it feels like, particularly in the last couple of years, right, that sense of invisibility, isolation, and exceptionalism, kind of like the model Negro uh, thing that sometimes happens to people of color in majority spaces, has caused a lot of stress. And to the extent that we have young people who are non-binary or gender expansive, so then you're adding on, right, all of these other identities that you're negotiating at home, but also having to negotiate in unfamiliar spaces. So, what are some of the strategies that you're seeing that are having a positive impact?
For me, with my work, at the heart of what I do is self-esteem, because I've seen the sequelae of the trauma of racism, discrimination, the self-esteem effects of it, and not being treated for years, and how that leads to lower educational attainment, lower college attainment, the dropout system, the later depression, anxiety, chronic physical health issues in adulthood, in people in their 50s and 60s, when there were often issues that happen even in early developmental years, age 9, age 10, age 11, being, discriminated in school, being called names, all kinds of stuff. So when I see that stuff, I hone on it early, because I do know that when we intervene very early and talk about it and process the trauma and have reparative conversation, it could actually make a lifetime difference. So I spend a lot of time on that. A lot of things that I also know is the power of having positive people around you. Like, they say you're the sum of the 5 people you're around. So sort of teaching my young teenagers, adults, even adults, surround yourself with positive people who are going to pour positive words, positive life, positive thoughts, positive ideas into your head, and extract anyone else that's going to traumatize you. So we have a lot of conversation about that. And then just general physical, how do you take care of your physical health better? How do you meditate better? How do you take care of nutrition? How do you, take vacation? How do you rest? Especially as some of us Black women who have a lot on our plate and we work a lot. How do we include rest as part of our self-care? We also have a lot of that conversation. And then anytime I see that there's been a major traumatic event that happens, for example, I had a sister who was afraid she was going to lose her job because she forgot to set the alarm. And she came in crying like, I'm going to lose my job today. And we had to work about it. You're not going to lose your job. I know you're the only girl in that room, but you're not going to lose your job. Don't let the story you tell yourself about this event now lead to a whole sequela of event. So anytime there's any sort of trauma, picking up on it and changing the script that we're writing about it in our head of what's going to happen because of that trauma. So those are some strategies I use, some of them in my work with the women I treat.
Thank you for that. Did anybody else want to chime in? You're mute.
I'm muted. So when girls enter, even think about the college access space that I've developed at the Y, we have a holistic approach to everything that we do. We meet the girls where they are. No one is talking over them, above them. We make sure they eat, right? Underserved communities have food insecurities and stuff. So we're treating girls who need food, right? And we do provide some mental health services, right? We do check-ins with parents and students, right? There's girls in college right now, going into these white spaces for the first time. And so, when a teacher's looking at you and asking you to speak for the entire Black community, that feels some type of way, right? So I even created a persistence model for one of the programs that we're involved with, and make sure that daily, weekly, monthly, whatever the need is. We have social workers that really, really try to have professional people who know the space of mental health better than what I can provide, right? To meet the girl where they are and see what the needs are and help her bring out whatever that space that needs healing from whatever trauma that girl has experienced, and creating a safe space for girls to just come to, a girl-centered space so that they can feel free to be their authentic selves in any capacity. Creating that space of safety for them is important. Feeding them. I had one girl in our program and I didn't know that, she was going through food insecurity at home. She was eating out of garbage cans and she didn't say anything. So, really loving on the girl, making sure that she feels safe, that her voice is welcome to share anything. I had one girl that was scratching herself on her neck. And no one asked her, why are you scratching? What's that on your neck? She was screaming for attention.
Rolanda, can I just lean into that? Because, even in our families and communities, sometimes we see a young person exhibiting behaviors that are not what we would want to see in them. And sometimes just the simple question, what's going on?
Mm-hmm. What's going on?
How are you? Like, I have seen more tears from like, what's up? Like, talk to me, than anything else.
Yes.
We are so focused sometimes on body control and compliance for Black youth that we're not just doing the basic like, hey, what's going on? What's up? So I think that is so important.
It is. It is. I had, and then also making sure that the people that's working with the girls are trained, right? Mm-hmm. That part, because, a lot of new people in the space, right? may feel uncomfortable, engaging in certain ways with the girls, right? So making sure you have the people well trained to work with these kinds of things that the girls go through. Because COVID has changed the work even more. There's more despair we're seeing. There just more upticks on mental health for the girls. They want to run and just do things that they're more comfortable doing instead of stretching and expanding. They want to give up. It's a different era for our youth. They do want to give up. So they need women like us, right? To just help them pull along. But we also do have to train, have good people that, you know, are able to do the work effectively. I'll probably train them too.
And sometimes they need to be doing their own work, right?
A lot of times, I think it's people don't understand how mental health issues manifest, especially in a lot of young kids. They could come out in behavior. They may not say that this is what I'm going through, but it comes out in the behavior they show. And I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community about what that sort of looks like, and it's misinterpreted and misunderstood.
Yeah, I appreciate you naming that. I think one of the things, at least in the space that we're in now, which I think is a good strategy, is to have people with different kinds of expertise and
Mhm.
connections to be a part of that community that is working with girls of color specifically, right? And so, because there might be a different need, I might have a different expertise, somebody might have a different point of view because of how they enter into the space. I think that's so important that we have lots of different touch points, but also people with a range of expertise who can connect with young people. And I also think about like the importance of strategies that are supporting narrative shifts, right? So, what does it look like if we change the narrative about who Black girls and gender expansive youth specifically are, right? What happens when they go into a clinic for a checkup? What happens when they walk into the classroom? What happens when they get onto the train? There's a different response that they're going to get from other people because there's a narrative shift in what people are thinking about and envisioning when they hear a Black girl, right? It's more expansive. It's one that is recognizing that it doesn't mean just one type of young person, right? That behavior is going to look lots of different ways, that their interest in music is going to look lots of different ways, right? And that all of that is a part of who they get to be, versus I think the very limited types of narratives that we see in popular culture about who Black girls are, who they're supposed to be, right? I think some great organizations that are doing that narrative work is Vibe Theater. So great to have y'all a part of this conversation. The work that you all are doing in a unique art space, and giving young people the tools to express themselves, to learn the on the stage and behind the scenes work. But also, I would just love for you to take the time to tell folks about what you all do, because I think there's so many lessons about strategies that work that we can learn from you.
Thank you for that. I was actually going to jump in as soon as you started mentioning narrative. Uh, I think there's two things I actually wanted to speak on. One is the overall core of our curriculum and of our pedagogy and how we do the work. And at Vibe, our work is towards racial justice, which the principle that we use is targeted universalism as our framework. It was coined by John A. Powell. Um, it's a belief that there is a universal benefit to centering the narratives and lived experiences of those who are most vulnerable and historically disinvested in the United States. And of course, that is Black girls and gender expansive youth of color. Um, in our pedagogy, in order to deepen our work and practice of equity, we must begin and lead with those who are furthest away from the opportunity in order to close the gaps for everyone. So that's really at the core of our work. And that's why it's really important that when we're talking about shifting the narrative has to come from those who have been harmed and disinvested in. And that's why it's so important for us to create these uncensored spaces for them to tell their story from their perspective and not have it be told for them. And then the second portion of that is more on the day to day inside of the work that we do, is we do our best to create what we call nuggets of free. Because Vibe is led and run by Black women and femme identified folks, there are actually very few, if any, safe spaces that we can provide or enjoy freely on a day-to-day basis. So rather than, claim for ourselves and our participants, that we are a completely safe space everywhere you go, we invite you in to get what we call your nugget of free, a small sense of what it feels like mentally, physically, and spiritually to express themselves untethered, uncensored, and unbothered by all the barriers of the world. So racism, misogyny, war, capitalist hierarchies, even if it is only for the 2 hours that they're in rehearsal with us, or whether it be only during, the phone calls that we have, or the text messages, or the emails, or the opportunities we give for them to be in space and community with us, is something that they can take everywhere with them, even when they aren't always feeling like they're in a safe space externally. They can bring that with them and still have community with them and have connection to community. So that's something that's really important in how we strategize creating those spaces for them. Another part of that is making sure that they're at the helm of the decision-making process. There's nothing in our organization when it comes to our performances and the creation of the performances or the events that they don't have a say in. Even when it comes to the marketing of how they want the show to be presented, they have to approve it. And because they're constantly in the world where, even though they're seen as adults, they're not given the decisions of adults, they get to make those decisions when they're with Vibe. So that way they can have full autonomy over their work and over themselves.
That's so important. So, which also kind of leads to my next question about what does leadership and advocacy look like in terms of setting the agendas for the work that you all are doing? Somebody wants to know how old they have to be to come to Vibe.
Yes.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna, since I already spoke, just have that on. We make sure that they're a part of the conversation. There's been so many asks for, Vibe to attend conferences and things and talk about Black girls and what they need, and then there's no Black girls in the room. So we make sure that they're a part of the conversation. We bring them everywhere we go. And they play an integral role of the organization. The organization would not exist without them because it is for them. And in a way, it's in collaboration with them. So when we make decisions on what we need to do as an organization, how we need to cater to them, we make them a part of the conversation, both from the creation of their performances, even up until their performance. Vibe always has a talk back at the end of the performances with the audience to address the issues that they've talked about. And then we also bring them to all the events that we have to talk about those issues as well. So they are very integral to the organization because we place them at the decision-making position.
Cedra, what role are young women and girls playing at the Grant Makers for Girls of Color?
Yeah, so at G4GC, girls and gender expansive youth of color are informing our work. So everything from helping us think about how we engage them, how we are setting priorities for our investment, very specifically with the Black Girl Freedom Fund. Every year that we have a grant making cycle, I work alongside a grant making council that consists of Black girls and gender expansive youth ages 14 to 22 years old. And so they are the final decision makers on whether or not we invest in individuals and organizations that are submitting grants to us. And so they participate for about 2.5 months, first in getting to know each other as a group, getting to understand Grant Makers for Girls of Color and the specific work of Black Girl Freedom Fund, an understanding of the history of philanthropy in the United States and how we are doing philanthropy at Black Girl Freedom Fund. And then we start to have conversations about our voice and how we need to be able to, use our voice in a way so that we are heard, how we are making sure we're not silencing one another. How is it that we're building consensus for our decision-making process, and also taking the time to talk about our relationship with money, right? For most of the young people that we're working with, they're not coming from families that could easily cut the kind of check that they're going to be basically telling me to cut for organizations, right? So what does it mean to know that you are responsible for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that are going to go out into investment if you haven't had the opportunity for yourself to think about your relationship with money? There are different things that can come up along the way. And then once we go through that, we start to vet the applications that come in. And so right now we actually have an open application that closes on March 31st for organizations that are centering the artistic vision, activism, and or innovation of Black girls, femmes, and gender expansive youth. And so the young people will be looking at those applications that come in, and we'll be working together to make a decision. So they are a part of not just who is advising us in how we move as an organization, but they are advising on this vetting process for money that is going out and being invested in their communities.
You know, that's so powerful, which is why I'm so glad that you and Rolanda could be part of this conversation, because I was familiar with Black Women for Black Girls a couple of, maybe a decade or so ago. But this whole idea of like shifting the narrative, how do we make sure that those who have power and resources are hearing our voices? Because sometimes it feels like I'm just, preaching to the choir, and y'all are, we're all in the same choir, right? So, this idea, right, particularly for the Black Girls Freedom Fund, I'm imagining that there are people who don't look like us who are investing in that work, right? So how do we like broaden this idea of the narrative shift, especially in the wake of social media, which has, come up in my organization. I'm sure those of you who are doing direct service as well, right? How deeply these images, the idea that there's a thing called an Instagram model, and that everybody is kind of like measuring themselves against, sometimes really toxic imagery. I was just watching Black China, like now she's trying to undo all of the cosmetic procedures that she's done. But sometimes how we feel about ourselves is generational, right? And so I can remember, I almost feel like there's a beauty point system, right? So if your hair is a certain length, maybe you get some points, but like I have a big, wide Black nose. And that definitely, I got hammered in middle school over the shape of my nose, the size of my nose. And I can remember going home and telling my father, like, the minute I hit 16, bruh, like I need a nose job. And the challenge is, right, I look just like my dad. So he was deeply hurt and offended, right? But some of that colorism, some of that, some of it is external, but some of it also comes from, the caste system that we find ourselves in.
Right.
And so, with all of these voices weighing in on, I feel sometimes like Black girls are the most scrutinized, like it's just like, sometimes it's like, no matter how you look, no matter how you walk, no matter how you speak. I'm going to use Angela Bassett at the Oscars as an example. Like there's all this whole narrative about like, she didn't smile at the moment that, Jamie Curtis got her Oscar. She didn't get up and clap. Like, what if her foot hurt? You know what I'm saying? Like,
well, here's the other thing too. I'm sure there was a camera that was assigned to be on, right? So that they can create a story, which is a whole nother thing that folks maybe will or won't say, right? But a camera was positioned on her, trust me, all night to get all of her reactions, to play it up, to create something, right? And I think to your point about social media, it's a tool. And either we're working it as a tool for our expression, for sharing or connecting, or it's beating us over the head with a hammer. But social media is a tool. So when we were in grade school, you passed the note. By the end of the period, maybe everybody in class read the note. Now with social
Maybe
media,
the
I
teacher got
type a
the note and
message,
ripped it up. Right.
everybody in the school knows it, everybody connected to whoever in that classroom knows it. Like how that note is amplified now goes far and wide because of social media and the backlash, right? And so maybe in the classroom, somebody's best friend saw the note, and so that's one person I have to deal with. But with social media, because of the amplification, the hammer that I get hit with feels like so many from so many different directions, because now so many people are connected to this message that I put out. And I think it's important for us as adults, as well as for young people, to take pauses from social media and have the time to think for yourself, does everything that I think and feel need to be posted in this moment at this time? I think it connects to something that Dr. Tolu said around self-esteem. And some of that is because you want the likes, you want the engagement, you want the clicks, because even if it's bad news or thumbs down, it's interaction, it's attention. And if your self-esteem is such that that is what it takes for it to inflate, then that's what you'll do. And that's what you'll keep doing. And a lot of these social, well, all of them are programmed to program us, right? To program us to keep coming back to it. So I just really think it's important for young people and for adults to take those breaks, and to be with people in real time as much as you can. And to just, again, be reflective of how you are using, yes, the bathroom walls. Yep.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying I wrote on the bathroom walls, but I'm saying I understand where the
other
comment
people.
is coming from. I've seen messages on the bathroom wall is what I'm saying. But yeah, I think it's important for our wellness to make sure that we take those breaks as well. I think one of the things around Black Girl Freedom Fund, which has been awesome, is connected to a broader campaign, the $1 billion for Black Girls campaign, which is a call to action to invest $1 billion in Black girls, femmes, gender expansive youth and their families between the start of the campaign, which was 2020, through 2030. We've been able to use social media to amplify that campaign in the same way that we've been able to use social media to amplify this call for applications for funds that we are releasing. So again, I think folks get to really be reflective on how they are using social media. And I think for young people in particular, take breaks. Take breaks. It could be, you know, one day a week that you're just not going to be TikToking or posting something for the gram. It could be a week out of a month. It could be a whole month out of the year that you're just like, I'm not going to be on any kind of social media, and keep it to that and just see what opens up for you. You know, you might realize you have a lot of time. You might realize that lot of time shifts into you pouring into a hobby that you didn't even know was a hobby, but now you have time to explore it and to play. So that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, we gotta try to dispel. You want to go? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, I was going to say that it's at the core of my work is the whole idea of self-esteem, because as I said, I think the onslaught on us is just a lot. And imagine going on social media multiple times a day and getting that constant message, there's something wrong, you're not good enough, this person's better, you have less. And what is that doing to their brains when they're getting these messages 10,000 times a day? You know, when I was growing up, maybe you watched TV during a particular time, and that's when you were being affected by messaging, or when the magazine came in the store. Now it's 24/7, right? Especially if you're addicted to that stuff. And the kids don't know that. I mean, I'm aware that there's messaging being sent that's been programming you to make you feel less than, but they don't know that. So actually taking time to educate, the kids in terms of what is actually happening with the messaging, the programming, that this is real and it's affecting their self-worth, and that's why they're having depression and anxiety and all these kind of self-esteem issues, and how can they get off it to protect their brain, is actually a very crucial conversation, because it's only when you have insight into something you can change your behavior. But you'd be surprised how many kids have no idea that this is actually what's happening to them, and then they come to our offices and they're having all these issues. But as I said, the core of the work I do with a lot of women is the self-esteem stuff, because when you trace it, there's often someone somewhere that told somebody they're less than, right? That's a major trauma that we see in our community, and we have to fix it.
go on to disappear.
Yeah, so that's why that work is actually is very crucial for me with the girls that I work with. Um, I had a patient recently that just likes to go on social media and see how many likes that they have. And if they don't have any likes, they feel bad and they feel anxious and then they feel depressed. And having to educate them that this, it's not your fault, that when you get likes, there's a part of your brain that's your reward system that gets lit up and you feel good about it. And then when you don't get liked, there's a natural part of your brain that's not going to feel good about it. So it's not like your fault that you're developing depression, you're getting a boost and a low, a boost and a low. There's a simple solution: get off it, get a detox, and actually educating about things like that goes a long way.
Yeah, and I would just add to that a little bit because I got off and came back on. But yeah, I mean, we have to try our best to dispel that social media is not real life. It's not real life, right? Safety, survival skills, self-esteem, self-image, education with the girls. One of the things that, at Black Women for Black Girls that we do every year, we do a college shower, right? And it's our way of, counteracting the allure of teen baby showers and promoting the importance of education as a means of increasing, their life successful outcomes, right? So if there's ways that we could just try to help them dispel, what they think is real life. That's not real life. That's not real life.
I almost feel like we were, and maybe I was naive, right? We were following like the Black feminist movement. We were moving closer to, women having the freedom of expression without being so diminished and sexualized. But now I feel like, in so many ways, whether we're talking about control of our bodies and, decision making around like whether or not we're going to become parents and who gets to decide those things. I also feel like there's a kind of a hypersexualization of women that's happening again, that is also kind of like feeding into this. So on the one hand, I feel like the activist community is continuing to make strides, but within a larger context of a society that's trying to pull us back in the opposite direction. And so, it's really confusing. And also, like, how do you give girls the skills and tools? So, on the one hand, right, you want to say, focus on your education. You can be whatever you want to be, right? But I'm going to venture to guess that everyone on this call has experienced some serious level of workplace trauma, right? And so I can say, like, nobody prepared me for that. Right? It was just like I followed the rules. Okay, where's my coins, right? Where's my acknowledgement? Do I have voice in this space at this time? And so how do you give young people the agency that they need, while also giving them some tools and strategies to manage the microaggressions, which, oftentimes are macroaggressions, right? And still feel whole, right? Because sometimes people reach out to me about their situations, and like I know that there may not be a solution for you in that space, in that context, because that's the world that we're navigating.
I think for us, just getting the education, as we all can probably testify, is not enough, and we need to do a lot more training on the other soft skills beyond just the degree. I go back to our self-esteem, even when we're in the spaces, and what do you do when someone's trying to, attack that? How do you solve that? How do we take care of ourselves, mind, body, soul, every day, right? How do we get good mentors so that when things are brewing, things are not going right, there's someone you can talk to early before things completely escalate? How do we come up with our plan B, plan C, right? How do we have a social support to support us in the spaces? I think there's not enough we do on those part of the soft skills, which is like the skeleton that helps to hold you when you're in the spaces and just getting the degree and all of that, it's, you know, in this world we live in, this hyper competitive society, it's just not enough. It's not enough.
And so many spaces are designed to exclude us.
Absolutely.
Right? With intention. It's not accidental, right? People know that they're causing harm and they're okay with that, right? Because so many before us have said you're causing harm, right? So we get to a point, you know, the murder of George Floyd happens. There's this influx of, you know, philanthropic investment in Black and Brown organizations. Everyone's issuing statements like every other week. But I would venture to guess, now that we're, you know, a few years out, like what substantively has changed about how people, you know, approach these issues and support organizations like the ones that are represented here. You know, how do you break it open? Like, you know, do we just create something else? You know, I'm just not sure. The Oliver Scholar students, you know, were at the forefront of a lot of the Black at accounts that were on Instagram and other social media. So the Black at accounts were basically an anonymous vehicle for Black and also Latinx young people participated to talk about their experiences in majority institutions. And what I was just amazed by was, like, the young people didn't just come with a complaint. They came with like strategy, levels of accountability, ideas for organizational transformation. And it was like, yeah, sure. Yeah. But like disrupting power, disrupting resource allocation, just seems to be, you know, it almost seems like you can't penetrate this thing at all.
Well, I think that's why we need people to still be involved in politics, right? You know, in government, right? Be at the table at the high level to be able to advocate, right? And have, you know, as tough as it is, have people who are rising to the level of leadership in major organizations, because they're the ones that are going to probably advocate the best for us, you know. So just again creating that pipeline, you know, beyond, you know, the middle level people entering the C-suite and entering government. I think we're still always going to need people like that to be the ones to break the barrier at that level.
I'm glad she brought that up, because even when we were before the whole Emmy thing happened for the voting video that we did, one of the girls in our session said, "Why does it matter that I vote? My vote doesn't count." And so the project started to try to dispel that myth in her own voice, right? I wanted to let her know that her voice does matter and it counts. And so I was like, okay, we're going to talk about government and how voting works. And what do you guys like to do with voting? And so they helped create the documentary. They was like, well, we want to go around Brooklyn, because these were girls not even at voting age too. And so it was like, we want to go around in Brooklyn and ask people why they vote, why they don't vote. So I started getting happy, because I was like, okay, now they're interested in voting. But it starts from that question. When you see something that a girl has a question about, you as a leader, you know, identify that thing and try to help pull her out of it. I didn't know by me trying to help pull this one question out of this girl would start a whole movement, will then evolve to an Emmy. And it's their Emmy. It's not my Emmy. It's their Emmy. So now they're empowered, right? When girls can be their authentic selves, find a voice and be strong and strengthen that voice, then you start seeing that impact. Then you start seeing the evolvement of the girl, right? But again, they need to know that their voice matters at the highest form of government and what that looks like, right? And in every space, what that looks like. They have to feel comfortable in every space. I strategically try to take them, you know, out into corporate, you know, entities that, you know, bring them into spaces that don't look like them, just to get the uncomfortability knocked out of them. You know, I want them to know that, you know, they can belong in any space, be in any space. Any space is open to them. You work on that confidence. You help that girl develop her voice. And then you start seeing the impact. And it takes us, we're the leaders, right? We're the women. So that's one thing about Black Women for Black Girls. I always say they found me because I was looking for women like me. I was like, well, where are the executive women that want to help these girls? What do that look like? And so they found me and I was like, okay, we're here. And so we work strategically. And we need more women involved in our work too, just saying. But we work strategically together to help that girl find her voice, build her self-esteem and confidence. And then you start seeing the evolution that we would want to eventually see.
And that's important because, the best people to teach you are the people who've been there, who've experienced stuff before. Because, we know what lies ahead. We know the potholes. We know the hurdles, right? So we can help to sort of shorten their race by educating them early, like of what's ahead of them.
That's
and
right.
give that advice. Absolutely.
Right. And each generation is different. So as you're teaching them, they're teaching you stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know what to combat and redirect. Because we know a little bit long. We lived a little bit longer. So we'd be like, oh, that's fire. Don't touch that. Mm-hmm. But there's an exchange in this thing because, COVID produced another generation. Next year, we're going to have another involvement of the girl. It's going to look different every year. So there's an exchange too.
Building intergenerational power.
Absolutely.
Since you have to jump first, do you have any parting words of wisdom, advice, anything?
Yeah, I'm sitting with this last question and just wanted to add to it, for folks to consider that the disruption is needed at every level.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about the young person who is saying politics is not for me. I totally get it. At whatever level, at whatever interest you are, if you are somebody who makes things, if you are an artist, if you are somebody who likes to do research, you being disruptive, you saying this is not just a hashtag, this is something that needs to be changed now. Use what you have where you are at and be there for the until it happens, right? I think one of the things that can be hard for folks is that change does not happen as quickly as we want it to, right? And if we release romanticizing movements that we stand on and we look at how much time it took for things to shift, if we really look at all of who the players were, right? And so just very quickly, when people like to quote and talk about the life of Reverend Dr. King, he did not move in isolation. He did not work only with Christian leaders. He did not work only with Black folks, right? So what did it mean for the most famous march out of that movement to be organized by an openly gay Black man, Bayard Rustin, who is often forgotten by historians, right? This is somebody who continued to be an activist beyond the civil rights movement until his death. And so wherever you are at, wherever you are finding yourself, where there's inequity, gather with 2 or 3 people. It's never everybody. Anybody who's like, oh, back in the 60s, everybody was in the street. Everybody was not in the street. Everybody was not in the street. It was a small group of people who came together on a common goal, who worked through ups and downs within those organizations, tons of ups and downs and turnover, but who were committed to that goal and worked until. And was flexible, right? I think that's the other thing too. Sometimes we are set on like, this is a strategy that's going to get us this fill in the blank win. And our refusal to be flexible, our refusal to allow young people to lead, our refusal to let go of what worked in the past to explore a new idea is a thing that can hold us back. And so I think it's important also that we are flexible in not only who makes up that circle of folks who are moving, but also in the strategies that we are using, the systems that Micheline was talking about earlier, capitalism, patriarchy, racism, sexism, misogyny. Those things were not built in 3 years. Those things have been operating for generations, for centuries in this country. They are cousins of one another. They are intertwined. When you pull at the string of one, you're pulling at the string of others. And so it's not going to take 3 years for all of a sudden capitalism to fall apart. It's not going to take 3 years for all of a sudden people to understand why racism is widespread and an issue, not an issue, but a system that is connected to other systems that we all benefit from, right? It's not going to happen in 3 years. It's not going to happen in 10 years. And so I think when people choose to disrupt, it's always helpful to disrupt in spaces for the moment. If the idea is to disrupt in a way that is strategically going to tear down barriers that have been existing for decades, for generations, then we have to be in it for the long haul. We need to know when to leave our notes and our lessons and pass it on to whoever is coming along, and be a living elder who is coaching, and elder not necessarily in age, but as it relates to like wisdom and expertise, because I have definitely worked alongside young people who come with that elder vibe and wisdom and expertise. But that we know when our role shifts to, and how we can still be in contribution, but maybe from a different angle. And I guess the last thing that I'll say before I tune out for now is just appreciation, Danielle, for you always reaching out and inviting me to be a part of these conversations. I truly appreciate it. I appreciate the work that you've been doing with Oliver Scholars all this time, and how the organization has grown and who is coming out of the program, right? And I think it's so key that as we are thinking about how we're investing and uplifting girls of color, you don't have to have a fat checkbook. You don't have to have that CEO position where you can create a unique program for all these girls to come through and learn new skills. But look at what it is that you do have. Look at who you are connected to and start there. Start there and expand, right? Start there and expand.
Thank you so much for your wisdom, your ongoing work. I know you've been at this for a long time, and our communities continue to benefit from your leadership. So I appreciate that. Did anybody else have any final thoughts that you wanted to share? Micheline, I just want you to know that I sit on the board of the New York Women's Foundation, and I wanted to make sure young folks were represented. And so Ana Oliveira said to me, I got somebody for you. So I'm so glad that you were available to be a part of this conversation.
Honestly, I'm truly honored to be in this virtual room with such amazing women who are making strides in this, and holding it down and really continuing to be leaders, hoping to continue to learn from you all, as I also continue to lead as I get older, not also in years, but in experience. I feel like I've aged a lot in 1 year as a baby. And I also wanted to offer in the conversation that was had that it is also really important that in the thought of this being the long haul, that it is also important to sometimes take breaks and hold grace for yourself. It is in and of itself very traumatizing to witness what we witness on a year to year, a month to month, a week to week basis when it comes to what happens to Black people and Black girls and young women. And it can be traumatizing to have to relive it as we watch it happen again and again. So it is highly important that as we are preparing and continuing to be in preparation of the long haul, to hold ourselves and to hold grace for ourselves and each other, and to really lean on community. And so, yeah, that was just really important.
I love that, because we have to extend the benefit of the doubt to each other, because the world does not extend the benefit of the doubt to Black and Brown women, right? The story, the narrative has already been created, which is why I love like Issa Rae. I love Quinta Brunson, because I'm like, oh my God, weird, awkward Black girls. Like, I'm not by myself, right? That wasn't we went from like the mammy to like the home girl to the, and we are an expansive community in every sense of the word. And we have to make space for all of us. We have to model what grace and love looks like for Black women and Latina women, because so often we're not going to get that anyplace else. And, you know, they say you have to teach people how to treat you. So we can start that with each other. So I thank you so much for joining this conversation. It will live on YouTube for those who weren't able to join us live. And let's continue the work.
Yeah. I just want to say that, you know, I believe in a Black girl because I am a Black girl and I'm raising a Black girl. And so they need more women like us to help them. That's all I'm going to say.
Absolutely.
I think for me, we need a community. You know, it takes a village to raise a child, but I think it takes a village to survive as an adult. So at all levels, it takes a village, and it takes the community, young, old. We all just have to continue, because that's what the generations before us did. It took a village, and we're going to have to continue that history.
Well, I love ending on that note. I hope I can consider all of you a part of my village. Y'all know I'm not shy. I'll be calling you. So let the circle be unbroken.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Take good care. Thank you.
Thank you.